Having discussed different tools adopted by, different methods, critical methods adopted by feminist literary critics, now we shall go ahead with the tools of the feminist literary critics. Feminist literary criticism, while studying literature, may bring in tools from other critical disciplines. So it draws on from historical analysis, psychology, linguistics, sociological analysis, and economic analysis. It uses the tools from all these disciplines. It may also look at intersectionality, that is, looking at how factors including race, sexuality, physical ability, and class are also involved in the creation of a literary work. So, this is what we understand by the term intersectionality. So, apart from borrowing the tools from different critical disciplines, it also look at intersectionality by studying the factors like race, sexuality, physical ability, class, and other such factors. And for this, it may use any of the following methods. Mm, It involves deconstructing the way that women characters described in novels, stories, plays, biographies, and histories. Especially if the author is male. So that is one of the methods used by feminist literary criticism. Secondly, deconstructing how one's own gender influences how one reads and interprets a text. So this is somewhat near to the reader response criticism. And reader's response criticism, the reader's background influences the reading and interpretation of a text. So the feminist critics deconstruct how one's own gender influence or influences how one reads and interprets a text, and which characters and how the reader identifies depending on the reader's gender. So this is the process of deconstructing. Thirdly, it deconstructs how women autobiographers and biographers of women treat their subject, and how biographers treat women who are secondary to the main subject. So you need to understand, it deconstructs how women autobiographers and biographers of women. You can understand this. Women autobiographers means the women writing their own autobiography, and biographers means anyone who's writing the biography of women. So they try to understand the way they treat their subjects. So that is one of the methods adopted by feminist critics. At the same time, they try to understand how biographers treat women who are secondary to the main subject. Okay, yes, there can be different protagonists. Primary protagonists be different, and there can be other women characters who are secondary to the main subject. So they try to understand these two. Further, they describe relationship between the literary text and the ideas about power and sexuality and gender. So this is one more method that the feminist critic adopt in the study of a literary text. Uh, Feminist criticism is the critique of patriarchal or women marginalizing language, such as a universal use of the masculine pronouns he and him. You must have come across. Many of the feminists do not use he and him while talking about man in common. For example, when we say man is an animal, a social animal, and in continuation, they may object using he, and even in case of the common or general discussion, the general things. So they object the use of masculine pronouns. For example, while talking about a teacher, a manager, generally we tend to use he or him, but the feminist criticism objects this use of the masculine pronouns. Further, they try to notice and unpack differences in how men and women write. They talk about a style where women use more reflexive language and men use more direct language. For example, she let herself in versus he opened the door. We can see the difference of the use of language. So they try to talk about these differences in how men and women write. And they reclaim women writers who are little known or have been marginalized or undervalued, sometimes referred to as expanding or criticizing the canon. The usual list of authors and works, they mention. Now, these examples are, you are familiar with Apra Bain, the neoclassical writer. They try to show the contribution of the early playwright like Apra Bain and show how she was treated differently than male writers. You have studied her own essay, how she was criticized and treated differently. And she appeals, she urges the male writers of that period just to include her in the tradition of writing literature. So we can see that women has been undervalued even in the context of literature and writing. Even they refer to the retrieval of Zora Neale Hudson writing by Alice Walker. So they try to, what we say, expand or criticize the canon by listing the important women writers and their works. Further, they reclaim the female voice as a valuable contribution to literature, although it was marginalized or ignored formerly. They analyze multiple works in a genre as an overview of feminist approach to that genre. For example, science fiction or detection fiction. Further, they analyze multiple works by a single author, often female, and examine how relationships between men and women and those assuming male and female roles are depicted in the text. They examine the text to find ways in which patriarchy is registered or could have been registered. So these are some of the ways, some of the methods that they adopt while studying a literary work. Further, literary criticism or feminist literary criticism is distinguished from gynocriticism because feminist literary criticism also analyzes and deconstructs literary works of men, but gynocriticism is exclusively about women as writers. So in feminist women, but in case of gynocriticism or gynocritics, there is only the literary study of women as writers. Gynocriticism is a critical practice which explores and records female creativity. It attempts to understand women's writing as a fundamental part of female reality. Some critics use gynocriticism to refer to the practice and gynocritics to refer to the practitioners. Here I refer to the American literary critic Ellen Sholter, who coined the term gynocritics in her essay of 1979 towards feminist poetics. And unlike feminist literary criticism, which might analyze works by male authors from a feminist perspective, gynocriticism wanted to establish a literary tradition of women without incorporating male authors. So this is what you need to understand. Ellen Sholter felt that feminist criticism still worked within male assumptions, while gynocriticism would begin a new phase of women's self-discovery. So this is how we understand feminist literary criticism.